Hello. Now, I have touched on this issue before, but I think it's relevant in light of the exchange between President Trump and Jim Acosta of CNN. And it's relating to the exchange that Trump Acosta had and the fact that his press credentials have been taken away. Now, I've watched the exchange several times, so I'm not just speaking from hearsay. Um, Firstly, Sarah Huckabee Sanders lied when she said that Jim Acosta assaulted the young intern. Anyone watching that from a reasonable perspective can see that that was not the case. What happened was the young female intern tried to take away the microphone of Jim Acosta, and he held on to it. Now I've watched the exchange a few times, and I do think he was a bit egotistical in the way that he wanted to ask questions and be the only reporter that asked questions. I don't know exactly what the protocol is, like if every reporter gets a certain number of questions. I don't know exactly what it is. My understanding was that the president picks reporters and they ask questions. I mean, any president. But in the case of Trump, it's very clear that there's been a very rocky relationship with the media, even worse than what Richard Nixon, um, than the Richard Nixon experience of that. Now, I want to be clear that I am no sort of cheerleader for CNN. I do think that CNN has been profoundly biased in the way that they have treated Donald Trump from the very start. And even if you are not a Trump fan, and I'm not, you can see that. I mean, they have been out to get Trump from the start, in the sense that they've taken it in to their mind that he's a bad guy, he's a bad president, and that's, we want to portray him as the pantomime villain. But Trump supporters, I think, are also blinded by their almost sycophantic um, attitude towards the man. And I see a very dangerous situation, and it's twofold. Firstly, on one hand, you do have very powerful media networks like CNN, which to a large extent are unaccountable. Because in the United States, and I might be wrong about this, if someone can correct this, I would be all ears. There is no independent media watchdog. So there's no independent body to scrutinize the press. Sure, there's pundits, there's plenty of people that can criticize it, but there's no actual independent kind of mainstream organization. In the UK, we have Ofcom, and certainly there's plenty of bias in the British media as well, but at least there's Ofcom where you can register official complaints. If you think CNN's biased, how can you formally complain about it? You can make YouTube videos, you can, have a rant at a right wing radio station. Likewise, if you think Fox News is biased on the right, which it is, how can you officially complain about Fox News? I think people have a short memory when it comes to American politics, because for 8 years, Barack Obama was mercilessly criticized by the likes of Fox News. Trump supporters seem to forget that. Um, so there's partisanism on both sides, and no reasonable person can deny that. Now, regarding this particular exchange, Trump basically refused to have any more interaction with Jim Acosta. He said, "You're a rude guy and you're a discredit to CNN." He went on to come out with his usual line about fake news. And then the next reporter he went to, I don't know who it was, but he said, and the reporter actually defended Jim Acosta. And he said, "Oh, well, you're just as bad." Now, if you really want to believe the narrative that all reporters are fake news, i.e., any reporter that asks a difficult question must be fake news, then you really are taken in by something of a personality cult around Trump. I think what's happened is Trump has opened up a useful debate about the power of the media, but in the end of the day, Donald Trump's supposed to be the leader of the free world, and you cannot have a situation where the commander in chief, the leader of the free world, is constantly attacking the press as being enemies of the people. This is extremely inflammatory language. And it seems to be every time he gets a difficult question. Trump has very, very thin skin. There's no question about that. Um, when we see it from autocrats like Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, it's bad, but it's not that surprising because Turkey is a country that has a very fragile democracy. Um, you get other examples, Duterte in the Philippines. I made this point in my recent video about Bolsonaro in Brazil. The last 10 years, we've seen a rise of autocrats on the left and the right. But the United States of America has to be the beacon of democracy now. The disillusionment at Trump's base is very sincere and it's very strong. But I think a lot of the people who support Trump are blinded by their support for him. They can't see why this is a problem because they are so filled with hatred for CNN and other news networks that they think anything St. Donald says must be the truth. So if Donald doesn't like a question, oh, fake news. Therefore, okay, it must be fake news. Now, to be fair, CNN hasn't entirely helped the case because there has been times when, for example, during the campaign, they were videoed, uh, and there was a strong inclination that CNN woman had actually prompted questions to a target audience before the event. Things like that don't help. So, CNN hasn't entirely helped its case by taking a sort of self-pitying attitude. But just because CNN has bias doesn't mean that everything they say is fake news. There are very real questions about Trump's relationship with Russia. And I'm talking about Donald Trump personally. I'm not talking about necessarily his government. His government has taken a hard line on Russia. After the Skripal affair in the UK, the United States expelled more Russian diplomats at any time since the Cold War. Good. But Donald Trump personally has taken a very ambiguous stance towards Putin when he has been talking about Western allies like they're the enemy. Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, and even in Britain, he was less than complimentary in the way he spoke about our NHS. So Trump supporters, I think, are a bit blinded by their support for him. They cannot see that actually there are very grave consequences here for freedom of the press. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting that Donald Trump's sort of cancelling out. I mean, I don't think it's possible. I don't think, with all the willpower in the world, he can stop an independent media in the United States. The president doesn't have absolute power. But the attitude that he's taking, one would think that Donald Trump only wants positive questions, and that's the mentality that autocrats take. It reminds me a bit of when Wang Yi, the very arrogant Chinese foreign minister, had a little tantrum because a Canadian journalist in Canada, by the way, asked a very valid question about human rights. Well, Wang Yi had a little tantrum, and he had a rant about biased Western media. Now, in the case of Donald Trump, he can't say Western media because he's the American president, but he's showing the same sort of sensitivity as autocrats. And if you can't see that, I suggest you look a little bit deeper because that is what is happening here. Um, by all means, he can say that Jim Acosta is being rude, and I think Acosta was a little bit arrogant by, domineering the questions. But when you start to say you're the enemy of the people, this is really dangerous language coming from the President of the United States, calling the press the enemy of the people. Because this is going to bring, I mean, you could argue that the trust is already damaged, but when Trump is validating that, when he's constantly vilifying the media, that can't be good for democracy. Now, I've long said that where there is freedom of the press, there must also be accountability of the press. And I still stand by that. The same goes for British newspapers, which are very powerful. But if there is not the freedom for newspapers and networks to openly question those in power, then you have a situation of, well, leading to autocracy, and that is very, very concerning. So I do think I've looked at the attitude of Trump supporters, and their mentality is, oh, well, anything that's anti Trump is fake news or left wing propaganda. But I'm saying this not as a left winger, I'm saying this as someone in the centre, and there's been times I've agreed with Trump. So, I think this mentality that Trump supporters have is anyone who doesn't blindly support St. Donald must be a left winger. But it isn't that simple. I know there's many conservatives who are concerned about Donald Trump's attitude to the press. The late John McCain, who in my opinion was a great man, was very outspoken in his criticism of the way Trump handled things. I mean, this is the most egotistical, overly sensitive president in American history. And that is going to overshadow any achievements he has because personality is a big thing. For right or wrong, perception is a big thing, perception of personality. And if Trump wins in 2020, it will be because he has very cleverly manipulated the masses into this kind of personality cult. That's what's happening. And ironically, for years, that's precisely what the right was criticizing Obama supporters for. Now, there was a degree of that around Obama mania back in 2008. There was a kind of dewy eyed, like Obama is Superman kind of thing. But Obama's attitude to the press was very different. I don't recall Barack Obama banning critical reporters from the White House. There is a difference. I mean, every president gets criticized. Bill Clinton got lots of heat from the press. So did George Bush. But this situation is unique with Donald Trump, and I defy anyone to say otherwise. And it's very concerning.